play to win the game.
Somebody wins, somebody loses.
This is why you hired me.
Welcome, Karma Nation. NFL Week 4 is in the books. I'm your co-host, Brett Matthew, along with Zach James, your lead strategist for Bet Karma's NFL Sportfolios. You may notice that a little bit of our enthusiasm and gusto is fatigued at, let's say, putting it in the best possible light. Before we start, I think really this is just one clip I feel like sums it all up.
You blew it!
So if anyone was following us kind of leading into this week in our Circa contest, we were a half point behind first place. And essentially we had calculated if we did go 5-0 this week, we would either tie or win outright approximately $150,000 for the first quarter, like MVP contest in Circa. Instead, we went, we're 2-2 right now. But the expectation we're probably going to go 2-3.
We're getting the best of the line right now.
Yeah. So our Circa contest picks. So let's go down into performance. In our Super contest, in our Circa picks, we picked Browns plus 6.5. So that easily won, as Browns won outright. We had Raiders plus 7. Again, the points were meaningless because Raiders also won outright, dominated from start to finish. And then our losers, Redskins plus 2.5. Probably one of the worst picks that we've had all season, only to rival picking the Redskins last week versus the Bears. Not learning from that mistake. And then the Cowboys minus 2.5, which we just watched. Clearly the wrong side. Never flirted with covering that game. Super square. We knew it was square going in, but squares win sometimes, but not this week. That's for sure.
No.
And then our fifth pick is Bengals plus 4, which is tomorrow. So we're currently 14-4-1 in Circa. So still impressive, I guess, but not up to our expectations, especially since we feel like we've left a lot of games on the table. So Zach, how did our Super contest go?
Yeah, and real quick to touch on that, I think we are our worst critics. So that's why we're disappointed. Like, oh man, you guys are over 80%. Like, we beat ourselves over the head because we know we can be better, especially just from a selecting game position. Because I've been seeing sharps or square sharps or people on Twitter. Sometimes they pick games and you go, well, why are you even picking that game in that side? Are you square? Or is there any edge? Is there any value? Or are you just saying, I like Jacoby Brissett, like whatever it is, but there's a level of, we try to actually look at games from a, where's the value? What is sharp? And if we're going to choose something that's square, at least we're going to understand that, we're going with the public on this. Let's ride it out.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's something that we need to get better at because, one of the reasons that, we were talking back and forth throughout the day, kind of bemoaning our Redskins pick, was because we feel like that we looked at it only from one angle. And you want to look at these games from all angles. You want to look at like the fundamentals of the teams. You want to look at the sentiment of the marketplace. And then obviously you want to assess the price, the number, the spread. And we feel like, our handicap on that game was mostly around what we didn't like about the Giants and not as much assessing the fundamentals of the Redskins themselves. And so it was just a bad handicap all around. And of course, we got that gut punch right in the beginning of the day when Terry McLaurin was announced out as well. Easily their most dynamic offensive weapon. And on a team that lacks offensive weapons. So you take him off, and it was kind of just like a compounded effect of futility on that offense. I mean, the Giants are one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and they scored 3 points, and they were lucky to score that, in fact. So super ugly. Um, the only consolation prize is we did outperform the market actually, because the broad consensus market absolutely got crushed. So the top 10 consensus picks in Circa went 3-7. So
30%.
super ugly
Yeah,
there.
that's bad.
Super ugly.
So on to super contests, it's actually even worse for the market, but not for us. We did better. So we doubled down. We had Redskins. The line was +3 in super contest, and we took it at +2.5. I mean, our handicap was basically we thought Redskins would win, and so the line really didn't bother us at all. Obviously, we were wrong. Um, we took the Chiefs and the chalk. Unfortunately, that was our other square play of the week. We knew it was square. But we said, you know what? With Darius Slay likely out, Chiefs in a dome, Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball everywhere, they should probably get over the 7. They didn't. Wrong side. Our 3 wins, we had Panthers +4.5. The real reason we didn't really consider it in Circa is we lost a half point, and that burned us earlier in the season. So that kind of took us off the Panthers in our Circa pick. We did the Browns +6.5, easy winner, like Brett said. And then probably our sharpest play of the week, really, Bears -1.5, man. I tell you what, Brett, I think both of us said there's one thing we cannot bet on. And we learned this last year. We didn't learn about the Redskins, but we did learn about this. Kirk Cousins on the road, fade, fade, fade. Now, it doesn't
Yeah.
mean he can't win, but against a good defense, especially one like the Bears, just don't even trust Kirk Cousins. And that was number 2 pick in Circa, the Vikings. So
Yeah.
some people didn't
So
know
they
that.
didn't learn from past mistakes. So it looks like, yeah, this it's a good observation actually, because this was one mistake that we had made last year. I think like at least 2 times was betting on Kirk Cousins in unfavorable situations. And we kind of, even though kind of the market was high and on the Vikings and there was momentum and all this type of stuff, and even if we were getting a good price sometimes, it still didn't work out for us, because even the way this game played out, if you got Vikings +3.5, which looked super juicy to a lot of people, because I think it actually opened around 3.5, and it got bought up immediately, and then it just kind of continued to get bought up over the course of the week. Just getting hammered lower and lower and lower all the way down, closing around a pick'em essentially. And like you said, in Super Contest, Vikings was one of the most popular picks across the board. So we did learn from that mistake. So happy about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot to unpackage here. Kind of like along those same lines, a lot of those same picks we did allocate across our Bet Karma portfolio strategies. So if you read our note kind of going into the week that outlined our picks, we kind of indicated that going into week 4, we had kind of the least broad conviction of the season. It was hard to find a lot of bets that we liked. So we actually did take risk down a little bit across all portfolios compared to previous weeks, and that definitely did help. So even though we felt like, we didn't perform as well as we did, the whole point of this portfolios is to manage risk. And I think we actually are doing that. We're putting that into practice, because when we're performing well, we're performing big, and when we're performing poorly, we're performing poorly small. So going into this week, the portfolios across the board, conservative was up 2%, core was up 11%, aggressive 35%, and the multi-sport up 27%. And that was just through 3 weeks. So in week 4, we did have negative performance. Conservative is going to be negative 1.5%. Core is going to be negative approximately 1.5% as well. We went 2 and 3, but did still beat our benchmark, which is the top 5 super contest consensus plays, which went 1 and 4. So again, core went 2 and 3. We beat the benchmark by a game, but we did detract from performance by 1.5%. But we're still going to be up almost double digits on the year. And then aggressive, we really constructed this Sportfolio poorly this week, mostly because it was not as diversified as we typically have it. This was a huge oversight. We had a lot of Redskins kind of baked in to straight ups, to spreads, to teasers, to parlays. And basically, if the skins were going to get blown out, all these trades were going to blow up. And that's exactly what happened. Nonetheless, we actually are sitting with positive performance in aggressive somehow. So we're up approximately like 3.5% with another 6% currently outstanding, with a few round robins tied up into the Steelers Bengals game tomorrow.
And I want to touch on that real quick. The reason diversification is so vital is because, you know, for obvious reasons, but in regards to specifically like making bets on football, is, you know, our three top straight up underdog plays that we liked the most this week was Browns, as we saw in our picks, Raiders, and then Skins. Well, we were wrong about one of them, right? Their line was plus 140 straight up. Raiders, plus 280. Browns, plus 250. And I actually think they reversed, they switched by game time. So, the value of leaning into all three of those games, you're plus 5 units betting all three of those games straight up instead of being only up 2 units if you just do spread, or if you put them all on a teaser or a parlay, you get nothing. Right now, some people might like to round robin it or whatever you like to do, but just pointing out the value of not taking games and putting them all in the same types of bets across platforms, across portfolios, and instead breaking it up and diversifying. And even some other games, we had some leans that we could have brought in instead of the skins and repeating the same thing. So just that kind of diversification is key to limit the downside, which is obviously a key component of our portfolios.
Yeah, and I think we're definitely going to learn from this mistake this time. Again, this was like an oversight, because again, aggressive portfolio probably would have had much better performance than only up 3.5% as of now. Because basically Redskins blew up pretty much every pregame play that we announced in the article, and then a lot of the trades that we posted in the Discord chat are a lot of the trades that are saving us. So that's kind of where we stand now. We're still going to have positive performance across all portfolios on a year-to-date basis. This diversification just really goes into we want to win big when we win and lose small when we lose.
And it's actually, to your point, Brett, that's why it's so important to follow us, is because the clarity with which we had on the Raiders came Sunday morning, right? So we're putting out our portfolio plays in a nice, pretty article Saturday, right? And that's the majority of our plays, etc. But there's always going to be some new information, some new intel Sunday morning, and even if we live play some games, it was officially announced Ty was out Sunday, and the line wasn't really moving, and then it started to move. So it went from 7 down, I think, to 5.5 even. I mean, that's a clear, sharp indicator. We were on them earlier. We got them at 7. So it's just a reminder that's why it's important to follow us all the way through, is because, as we've proven, we have to make our Super Contest picks on a Friday night, Circa picks on a Saturday, and then we do our portfolio plays Saturday night, and then we do more plays Sunday morning. We get better as the more time we get because we get more information. So, and we cull down kind of where we're at with our individual leans and likes, etc.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into the games, shall we?
Let's do it.
So Titans, Falcons. I mean, again, this was another day that, I broadly watched a lot of the games, but again, not going to have super detailed information on every single one, because again, that's something that we do throughout the week, rewatch a lot of these games. And I think one of the things that I just want to implement kind of moving forward too, Zach, is just, we rewatch all these games during the week. But the thing is we don't want to overemphasize just whatever happened in this prior week. And I feel like that I did that this week with respect to a team like the Bucks, for example. Whereas I think probably on this podcast last week when we were looking at that line, and it was Bucks plus 10. Like, that's Bucks. Let's do Bucks. And then I rewatched the Bucks Giants game, and I really didn't like what I saw from the Bucks. Basically, Winston threw these deep balls to Mike Evans and a couple other players, and that was basically the whole their whole offense for that game. There's very little high level execution in between big plays, and I kind of got off the Bucks from that one game, even though kind of if you look into our preseason articles, I was extremely bullish on the Bucks and actually had the Bucks winning 10 to 11 games, and actually winning that division, and the Saints missing the division and a couple other things. But then, like, essentially, I faded my macro view and got hyper focused on the micro view of just what I saw in the prior week.
And
And you don't want to do that. And yeah, and we did a good job of actually not doing that on the Browns Ravens. We didn't buy into the Ravens, and we didn't sell the Browns based on their underperformance, because we actually said, hey, our macro view is that Browns were going to start the season slow, going to be a little bit clunky. People are probably going to get off them, say there was too much hype, and that the Ravens probably were going to start off hot because they're going to play some of the worst teams in the NFL. And then these things were going to then adjust, and revert back to kind of the trajectory that we had projected. And so we thought that there was kind of like a one team that we were buying low and another team that we were selling high, and they were actually playing one another, and thought it was like the perfect cocktail to basically buy to really go deep into the Browns, and it played out perfectly.
Yeah. Nothing to add on that.
But yeah, so Titans Falcons, we leaned Titans in this. It was basically, I think, Titans are bust. The line closed Titans +4, maybe like +3.5 in that range. We flirted with it in the contest. We flirted with it going into the sportfolios, but we just didn't have a lot of conviction on this game. I leaned Titans, but you didn't like Falcons. You didn't like Titans. I mean,
yeah, it's just, sometimes it's hard to get when two teams lose badly the week before and they both look ugly. It's hard to get a pulse on kind of the psychology of the teams, of like, because you assume they both are ready to play. And so if they're both ready to play, Titans going on the road, you figure Falcons can put up some points, which they did not. So I'm curious to rewatch this game and kind of see maybe what transpired, because apparently Mariota played out of his mind. Players were even like, "Oh, that's the Mariota we know and love," but I don't know who they're talking about, because that's like that's once every 4 games, and that's
yeah.
means he's not that
No,
good.
and that's exactly right. And I think maybe I actually mentioned this on last week's podcast, actually, when we were kind of previewing this game, was that the Titans can look really bad and then they can show up and like beat the Patriots by 20, which they did last season.
Good point.
There was a few games there where the Titans looked really bad. But that's why you got to pick your spots with a lot of teams, but especially the Titans. Situationally, because the team does have a good defense. And then again, yeah, Mariota can show up here and there. He's not going to play bad, 8 games in a row.
Yeah.
They have decent coaching. So the Titans won this 24-10. They were leading it pretty much from the beginning. Matt Ryan threw 53 times. I mean, I didn't watch this game too much, but every time I looked up, the Falcons were throwing the ball deep, and either hitting Austin Hooper or Julio Jones. Austin Hooper actually had 9 catches, 130 yards.
Wow.
So they definitely leveraged their tight end. But I think there was like a lot of turnovers. I know like Matt Ryan was under a ton of duress. And again, that Falcons offensive line is just really struggling, and the Titans look like they took advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I think they had 2 new offensive linemen integrated into the offense this season. So I mean, it might take them some time to adjust and get in sync together, or they may just suck. So we'll have to look deeper into that.
Yeah. Last observation on this game was it looked like the Titans ran the ball a lot, as Derrick Henry had almost 30 carries for 100 yards. So really hammering the run game there.
Interesting.
So next game you could do Patriots Bills. Patriots win the game 16-10. The line closed Bills +7, I think it was. Man, Patriots, super chalky play here. I think it was the number 3 or number 2 most popular pick in Super Contest. It was I think it was the number 2 most popular pick in Circa. Um, Man, Patriots, I mean, laying 7 on the road. I think kind of like our handicap in this game was that the Patriots offensive line is banged up. So Tom Brady probably wasn't going to get a lot of time. And that the Bills defense is obviously super tough, that they're going to be pumped up for this game. 3-0 teams. But we just didn't trust Josh Allen. And
And
that turns out to basically have been the Achilles heel for the Bills. But the Patriots really did struggle because they got a punt block for a touchdown. And if
mm,
you don't get that touchdown, this is 10-9. Now, of course, there could have other, if they didn't get that, like just different things in the game would have probably happened differently. So it wouldn't necessarily have been 10-9. But if you take a touchdown away from the Patriots in a very low scoring game, this game probably would have been even closer than it already was, and the Bills actually possibly could have won this game.
interesting. And from the outset when we saw this line at 7, this is why ultimately, if your handicap line is right on the number, so we basically put this line at about 7, which is why we definitely could not lay that number and take the Patriots, which we knew would be square as well. It was very tough for us to take the Bills because we thought the line was pretty accurate, and we would have to bet on Josh Allen, which I believe the Patriots got their first score off a Josh Allen interception. So,
Yeah. You know
um,
what the thing is now when I'm thinking about this game too is, a theme that we really implemented last week. And then again, I feel like the pressure just got to us this week with the contest and being a half game from first. And we kind of just moved away from, because again, last week we had the balls, we had the moxie to take plays that nobody wanted to take. And the Bills, in this instance, of course, is one of those games.
yeah,
It's one of those games where you have to hold your nose and say, you know what? Like the number, there's just a tad of value here. And the fact is, the Patriots on the road, -7, everyone's going to hammer it. It just is not that easy. And I think
it's a good point.
like the Bills was clearly the sharp side because not only did the Bills cover it, but again, there was a bunch of other things happening in the game that this game was very close. I think I saw something a stat that Tom Brady um, only threw less than 30% accurate passes, like catchable
Hmm.
balls in this game. Um, and Josh Allen again ultimately was one of the Achilles heel here. He threw 3 interceptions, and they were basically all Hail Mary bombs, kind of like hope and pray
Ah,
that your
just like against
uh
the Bengals.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But again, I think taking the Bills, taking the Lions, these are games that you just have to hold your nose and just say we got to do it. And if we would have kind of went with the same theme that we went with last week, we would have been sitting a lot prettier this time. And I feel like
Yeah,
again,
I think you're right because if you remember last week, we took games that we were confident the team we were taking was not going to win the game. And it's so whereas this week we thought the Skins, we thought the Raiders, we thought the Browns, we thought they would win straight up. So, getting 7 points with Raiders or, Browns, it's almost too easy to take. Whereas when you're picking the Bills +7, you're picking Detroit +6.5. Both teams could have won, but your handicap is really not pinning them as a team that can win this game very often, which makes it difficult to take the points. But this is why ultimately you bet numbers and you don't bet teams.
yep, indeed. And again, that's something obviously even we continue to struggle with and something that we want to implement into our process. So we just be more disciplined. That's what we really have to do. So moving on, Chiefs Lions. Again, as we just mentioned, Lions. I think the game actually finally did close right around a touchdown, but I mean it was at 6.5 all week with
Mm.
people pounding the Chiefs, and we knew Chiefs was probably going to be the number one consensus play, which it was in both
40,
Circa.
44% in Super
Yeah,
Contest.
yeah. So it was number one in Super Contest and Circa. And like Zach mentioned, we actually did pick the Chiefs in the Super Contest, which obviously, like picking the Chiefs in this instance, especially in a slate where, yeah, we didn't have a lot of conviction in a lot of games, but we had a lot of this, like medium conviction in games, and just kind of like back like just by taking the Chiefs, it was just like super lazy and just kind of assuming, because the thing is even what I wrote in the Sportfolio note that was released, on Saturday night outlining our picks, and I was kind of providing some color to why we were putting the Chiefs into core strategy was, we bought a point, so from 6.5 down to 5.5, because I was talking about how we don't trust the Chiefs defense to really cover by a touchdown, because the Lions could easily get a backdoor cover, and that's what really Matt Stafford has made a whole career doing. And the thing is, well, then why are you buying it from 6.5 down to 5.5? That's not going to save you. All it's going to do is just cost you more money. So again, just some real misfires, just like miscalculations. I feel like some of the things that we said, if somebody just echoed it right back at us, would be like,
Yeah.
wait, what?
Well, normally
You
we're
know?
normally we're pretty good at doing that to each other, which is why we work well in
Yeah.
tandem typically. And to be fair, obviously we knew it was at least we knew it was a square play. I think sometimes people who make plays don't know if they're on the square side or the sharp side. So we did it knowing it was going to be the number one pick. But last year in the Super Contest, I think the number one consensus pick on the season went
Yeah, it did
like
well.
13-3 or something, and we went 10-1 when we were aligned with the number one consensus. So I think this one was just one that it was just a bad pick in general because we knew why we
Yeah.
didn't trust it. So
Well, I mean, again, it was really what it was, just is a lazy pick.
yeah, that's
There was
fair.
very little analysis. It was just like, oh, Darius Slay's out. Okay, Chiefs by a touchdown. And the thing is, kind of like my main takeaway from this is, if you remember, late, kind of like maybe late November, early December, the Lions played the Rams, and the Lions played the Rams really tough. And I remember the game very specifically because we took the Rams, maybe -10 or something like that, and we ended up covering the game, but it was by a last second touchdown by Gurley, and I think the Rams won by 14. But the game was much closer than that. And in the Lions, there's a lot of like kind of chatter at the end of last season that the Lions had actually created this blueprint for how to really combat the Rams offense. And it was basically ever since that game that the Rams offense looked a lot more clunky than it had prior, or earlier in the season. And it's possible that the Lions did that here with the Chiefs. I mean, granted, the Chiefs still won the game and they scored 34 points, but I mean, this was not a clean, crisp game by the Chiefs as we're normally accustomed to seeing them. I mean, Patrick Mahomes still threw for 300 yards, but he threw for no touchdowns. There was a lot of turnovers, a lot of fumbles. I mean, and the Chiefs were very close to losing this game. I mean, I think it was either Kerryon Johnson or one of the Lions running backs basically fumbled the ball at the 1 yard line as they're going in for a touchdown. And I mean, by half an inch, his knee is down, or is not down. And basically, the Chiefs scoop up the ball, return it all the way for a touchdown. That's a 14-point swing.
Yeah.
So you take a 14-point swing out of this, and the Lions win this game straight up.
Yeah, and if you look at the pregame tape, Patrick Mahomes is throwing from his end zone line, like to try to throw deep balls, like kind of like how Steph Curry shoots the ridiculous threes to like impress
Mhm.
fans. I don't, I'm not trying to be like the old man, but like, what's the point of that, right? And that's kind of my one knock on Patrick Mahomes right now is, and I think he would admit it, or anyone who's honest will admit it, is he's got a little bit of like young Steph Curry, like I can do anything and I know it, which,
And then, well, because a lot of people tell him that too.
well, and it turns into ego, right? And when you have ego, you get pride. Pride comes before the fall. Honestly, it's
Yeah.
probably why the Patriots beat them last year is if you start believing you're hot shit, well, what happens when you get confronted with a guy like Belichick? Oh,
Yeah.
you lay an egg. And
Yeah.
so this was a terrible spot. Chiefs coming off, playing the Ravens, winning, crushing them really, getting a backdoor cover late. Like they're going on the road. Patrick Mahomes is throwing 90-yard bombs pre-game. Like, what are you doing, man? Like that's not even a real
Mhm.
route. Like so.
Yeah. Well, and just and when I was listening to some podcasts this morning, actually, kind of just prepping to see if we wanted to adjust the aggressive portfolio and the Discord channel and things like that. Um, I was listening to this one handicapper, um, and he was talking about how he thought Patrick Mahomes was the best quarterback that he's ever seen. And he's already come to that conclusion now, even though Patrick Mahomes is only in his third year. And he's already the best quarterback ever,
Mm.
according to this guy. And I respect this handicapper. Um, but that just I'm like, whoa, whoa. Like now it seems like you're going a little bit too fast. People are already anointing Patrick Mahomes as the best quarterback ever.
Yeah, it's too soon for that.
Way too soon.
Well, and I mean,
Um,
he like we talked about this week. He leaves balls out there. He doesn't, he leaves plays out there. He doesn't make the plays that are there
yeah.
sometimes.
Well, yeah, and when you rewatch this game and when I rewatch it too, I mean, there was a lot of passes by Mahomes that were to nobody,
Mm.
just into open blank space. So he didn't throw any interceptions, but 24 for 42. I mean, so that's 20 incompletions, which
Mm.
is very un Patrick Mahomes like.
And without Darius
So
Slay, so interesting.
And yeah, indeed, and without Darius, like, granted, the Lions secondary is pretty strong even without Darius Slay, um, but yeah, nonetheless,
Yeah.
um,
Well, and Chiefs don't really have a number one receiver without Tyreek Hill, so
yeah, and that's true. Like some of these injuries could possibly like start to catch up with the
yeah.
Chiefs. So moving on, Raiders Colts. Raiders win the game
Right.
31-24 in Indianapolis. Raiders were +7 to close. Um,
Well, and real quick, I want to touch on this. So I'm kind of having some revelations about you listen to podcasts, you listen to handicappers, you follow Twitter, all kinds of stuff, and you hear guys go on a Wednesday or a Thursday and go, "This is my best play of the week." Fade that, like whatever that is, fade that. If on a Thursday someone's giving you like this is their like lock or the best play of the week, like it might be a good handicap. So take that part with you. But I didn't love the Raiders until Sunday morning. I leaned
mm,
them, I like them more, then I loved them. But that was an hour before kickoff. So, well, why does that happen? Well, it's circumstantial. You know, we started the week, we didn't know all these defensive starters were going to be out for the Colts, but the number was too high before that. So, number's too high. Okay, I lean the Raiders. All these
yeah, it's too high even with a healthy Colts
with the
team.
healthy Colts. Steelers, we find out players are missing. We find out T.Y. Hilton's banged up. We find out he's doubtful. We find out he's not playing. And meanwhile, no one on talk radio, nobody on Twitter, nobody's banging the desk about Raiders, 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 which means, and everyone's scared of taking them and fading the Colts. For what reason? We're getting new information. There's so much new information on the Colts within a 5 day span, and everyone's acting like business as usual. And so getting that kind of clarity through the week, through to Sunday morning, is why it's so important to kind of pay attention all the way through. Because, my favorite play of the week was Redskins on Tuesday. But as it got closer and closer and closer, just like last week with the Steelers, happened to be right last week. But if you're that right, if you feel that much conviction that early in the week, you're probably not looking at it from multiple angles, and thus be cautious when someone's presenting an argument to like, oh, this team's a lock
Yeah.
so early in
Well,
the week.
the other thing is too is I mean once the Terry McLaurin out news came Sunday morning, I mean
Yeah.
I wouldn't have bet. I would have, if I could, I would take Redskins out of everything.
Yes.
Just because, again, he's their most important dynamic offensive weapon. You take that away, and there's just kind of like a compounded effect across the whole kind of offensive ecosystem there. Um, but and that's part of the problem of even making bets on Saturday night. Because you don't get that late breaking news on Sunday.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, T.Y. Hilton was out, Darius Leonard was out, so you got your best offensive player, your best defensive player for the Colts out. That changes things dramatically, and the fact that they're still basically giving the Colts the benefit of the doubt. And this is just so funny. You see how the market swings. Kind of like how we had mentioned this on last week's pod as well. It's just like Colts going into the beginning of the season, a touchdown underdog to the Chargers, basically saying with no Andrew Luck, the Colts are trash, and which we saw that they weren't. They played very competitive ball, the Chargers, and then a couple weeks later, only -1 versus the Falcons at home. So again, not even getting a full
Yeah.
benefit of the three, saying that these are evenly matched teams, and you just give Colts 3 for being at home. No, not even getting that benefit of the doubt. But then they win that game, and now they're a touchdown favorite.
With 5
Just pretty
starters
crazy.
out.
Yeah,
Now,
with
granted, that
five
wasn't
stars
that
out.
wasn't the line to start, but you get my point.
Yeah. So moving on. So Chargers, Dolphins. Chargers win the game 30-10. This was one that I found super fascinating because the public was heavy on the Dolphins. So Dolphins was actually a top 5 pick in the Super
So
Contest.
yeah, so pulling that up. So in the Super Contest, it was number 8. So it was the top 10.
Number 8.
And guess who was last?
Yeah, Chargers.
Chargers.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, again, just right to what we were just talking about, how this like pendulum swings of market sentiment with the public, just hating a team and then all of a sudden now loving a team. And I've talked about this in Discord and I posted this on Twitter before. One of the things that always makes us very suspicious is anytime the public likes an underdog. Because when the public is pounding an underdog, that Joe Schmo thinks they're being clever by not taking the favorite and by taking the points. They actually think that they're sharp. Now, it doesn't mean that that's like a surefire loser or anything like that, but that's just one kind of variable when assessing a game that makes me always very, very suspicious if I am actually leaning in that side. But in this game, I never leaned Dolphins. I
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that just kind of like what we talked about last week when we were talking about Dolphins Cowboys and how the Dolphins kind of showed some heart and it wasn't just a purely give up game. The thing is they still lost by 25. They still didn't cover. They still collapsed in the second half. They scored 0 points in the second half. And reverted back into the same Dolphins team as soon as the Cowboys kind of snapped out of their fog. And now playing a Chargers team who is desperate, who's 1-2, they can't be fucking around. They need to win this game. And again, Josh Rosen's still not a good quarterback. And he's got a terrible offensive line, limited offensive weapons, a miserable defense. And you're going to bet that team, who's possibly the historically worst team that the NFL's ever seen. Now, granted, they do look slightly better than weeks 1 and 2. But nonetheless, I probably will never bet the Dolphins all for the whole season, just because they're that bad. But again, it's even more shocking that all of a sudden the public's found a ton of value on the Dolphins. Not just the public, actually. I mean, relatively sharp bettors were on the Dolphins this week, and Chargers win by 20. Cover the 14.5, the 15.5, the 16.5. No matter when you bet the Dolphins, you lost.
Yep. Which brings us, I think, to your point, the Vikings and the Bears. Everyone was on the Vikings. Public was on the Vikings, pounding the Vikings, an underdog.
Sharps. I would say I don't know sharps broadly, but a lot of sharp bettors that I know are on Vikings as well.
I guess they didn't learn from us if they read our article about last year's Super Contest journey, which is posted on pinned on Twitter. You would know Kirk Cousins is not someone you bet on the road. I think he burned us last year on the road at the Bears. We took the Vikings, and they lost by like 10 or 8 or something. But yeah, did you see anything in this game?
But yeah, he burned us 2 weeks ago.
Oh yeah,
And a lot of bettors.
yeah.
And again, and in fact, actually, now I take it a little bit back. We didn't completely learn from our lesson this season.
No.
I think we've learned within the last 2 weeks, because yeah, we've already lost on Kirk Cousins because we bet him plus 3.5 or something along those lines versus the Packers, and Vikings were in control of the whole second half. We're down 21-0, but they came storming back. Totally stopped, completely shut down the Packers. Kirk Cousins going in first and goal from the 8 and just floats a easy pick, and basically, we're competitive from then. You cannot trust Kirk Cousins on the road. So it doesn't mean it doesn't mean it has to be an auto fade. So it doesn't mean you have to bet the Bears this week, but it means you cannot bet the Vikings. And a lot of people completely dismissed kind of this historical trend.
Well, actually, and real quick, I think that's honestly where most of our strength lies, is having a better than average, as good as any sharp, I would say, in general, of knowing what side not to bet. It's one of the things that is rarely talked about in sharp better world podcasts, whatever, is there's value in knowing what not to bet, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you do Patriots -7? Patriots -7 was never an honest consideration for us.
No.
It was Bills or nothing, right?
Yeah, and we just couldn't. We
couldn't do it, but
we couldn't do it.
And even if Patriots did cover, it wasn't necessarily the right side, and that's kind of a part of handicapping that's not talked about enough. Is, do you know where to lay off? And can be just as vital to long-term success as anything.
Yeah. And that kind of happened this week, and some of the things we'll get to. But I kind of liked Cardinals plus 5.5. You didn't like it, so you kept us off that. You liked Broncos. I didn't like Broncos, so kind of kept us off that. So we've kind of done that to ourselves. But actually, so more into this Vikings Bears game. So the Bears won 16-6 in Soldier Field. Covered the -1.5, closed pick'em, covered that. Bears covered every number. That kind of presented itself throughout the week. Mitch Trubisky went down within the first couple plays.
Thank God.
Shoulder injury. The thing is Chase Daniel comes in. Chase Daniel has been known. He did this last year. Comes in, plays a competent game, can get the win. But he's not obviously a long-term solution for the season. And the thing is, obviously, if Mitch Trubisky is out for 8 to 10 weeks or possibly the season, I have no idea yet, but I think it is definitely going to be a couple weeks, based on just some of the preliminary analysis that I've been reading. It's not an upgrade. It's not an upgrade. I think in small select doses, it can be an upgrade, like maybe today, but Mitch Trubisky is better than Chase Daniel, and I think also obviously Mitch Trubisky has a higher ceiling than Chase Daniel.
Maybe. It's hard for me to agree in general. I understand. I agree with you.
Because you really don't like Trubisky.
Well, I agree with you about Chase Daniels, but I just don't think Trubisky's any good whatsoever. I mean, he has upside.
Because he's still young. That's what I'm saying his upside is. I'm not just saying he has great games and then he has bad games, because actually he never really has great games so far. I mean, he might throw for 3 touchdowns like he did last week, but if you watch that game, it wasn't a great game by Trubisky.
No.
So that's why you gotta watch the games, to do, because they reveal a lot more than just looking at the statistics. So you look at the statistics, it looks like Trubisky had a good game. It looks like he had a great game versus the Bucs last season when he threw for 5-6 touchdowns. But again, he actually didn't really look that good. He just found guys that were wide open. It was a terrible game by the Bucs. Again, last week it was a terrible game by the Redskins. Nonetheless, we bet him again this week. That's another story.
Let's move on to the next game. On that note.
Yeah. So So let's do Bucks Rams.
Yeah.
So Bucks win 55-40 in LA,
I'm
and
not gonna lie, this is the shocker of the week.
oh, for sure. So the Rams give up 50 plus points 2 years in a row now. Gave up like 51 or 54 or something like that to the Rams last year. Now 55 to the Bucks. I mean, yeah. I mean, we definitely didn't see
I
this
wanna
coming.
I wanna say something about this real quick. I think this is a defining moment for this franchise with Bruce
For which
Arians.
franchise?
Sorry,
Bucks.
well, probably both actually, but I'm focused on the Bucks right now. The Bucks that I've been watching the last 20 years, 18 years since they won their Super Bowl, um, this team would never do that. What they did today, I've never seen before. And what I mean is, with how they lost that game last week to an inferior, banged up Giants team at home,
Mm-hmm.
how
Mm-hmm.
they gave the game away, then had a chance to just easily kick a field goal and win it anyways. Then they had to go all the way to the West Coast and show up and play that kind of game. The fact that they did that to me is a huge confirmation that Bruce Arians knows what he's doing. And he's, he'll still have kinks, and they've been imperfect, but I think that's a good omen for Bucks are not a team to sleep on moving forward. Just throwing that in the universe.
So you're buying into my thesis that they're going to win 10 to 11 games and are going to win the
Well,
NFC South?
I can't say that. Like, so when we get into like they're gonna win X number of games and da. Like, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, if the market is not buying into the Bucks, you should consider buying into the Bucks. So
Well,
depending where the
we'll see what happens
exactly,
now.
exactly.
Yeah. Obviously, this week would have been a good week to buy into the Bucks, and
Yeah,
we
but this
didn't.
was a thing that you can't really predict because again, a part of our handicap of this game, while why I wasn't entirely on it as the week progressed, was which version of the Bucks are you going to get? Is this the old typical Bucks who are just going to like, remember last year they go on the road, they play the Bears, they get, they lose 45-3 or whatever. And granted they were playing the Bears defense, but the Rams can have that kind of defensive performance. You didn't know, was it that kind of game, or were they going to tear up the Rams like they did to the Giants? A defense that's way better than the Giants. I mean,
Yeah.
they took it to them. So it's just something that I haven't seen before, so it's hard to predict something that's never happened.
Yeah. But now we know that this is in the Bucks DNA,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's very important because, that was an observation I made last year, if you remember early on in the season in the Vikings. When the Vikings got blown out at home versus the Bills, it wasn't a reflection in the sense that, oh, the Vikings suck and this is how the Vikings are going to perform every week. But it was the fact that that type of performance is in their DNA. So it's gonna show up again at some point in time. And that's something that you have to keep in your handicap. And so I feel like this is also a statement game from the Bucks, saying that I don't think the Bucks offense is going to be explosive every game moving forward, but we now know that scoring 5, 6 touchdowns in a game, that is within their competency, within their core skill set, and that can happen again later on in the season.
I like it.
So moving on, Seahawks, Cardinals. I did not watch a lot of this game. It looked, from what I was watching, it looked pretty boring. Very happy we didn't take Cardinals plus 5.5 because it was never competitive. Basically, Seahawks started the game 10-zip, then it was 20-3, and that was basically that. Seahawks win 27-10 in Arizona. Kyler Murray, 240 yards, an interception. Not too much to really take
Yeah.
away from this game, I would say. I mean, the Cardinals are not good. And
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why we, bet the Panthers so heavily last week when they were, 3-point underdogs. The fact that the Cardinals would be favorites versus anybody. I don't
Yeah.
care who's the quarterback.
It really sucks that you can't. Actually, I think we can. I think we're going to pay more attention to this for our sportfolios. Is the consensus picks in the Super Contest can give you a little insight into what the pulses in the sports betting market.
Hmm.
Seattle was 21st as far as selection rate consensus wise in the Super Contest. Cardinals were 17. So
Mm. So basically, like an ignored game.
an ignored game, but Cardinals were more heavily bet. And that to me is like, why are you betting the Cardinals? It feels cute, right? Like there's, like we talk about, there's why do you like that side? Like, is there a reason to like that side? Their
Yeah.
defense still is missing Patrick Peterson. Seahawks are rebounding off a terrible loss. Russell Wilson, is going to put up points against the Cardinals. Like there's like three things that have to like go right that shouldn't go right for you for the Cardinals to hit. And
Yeah. And
that's where we talk about trying to take yourself off a side and know at least like it's either Seattle or bust or what have you.
yeah, and the other thing is just calling out when a handicap is particularly weak. Because basically my handicap was the Seahawks struggle when they go and play in Arizona, and that's kind of been the case for the last 3 or 4 years. That even last year when the Seahawks went to Arizona, when Arizona was a much worse team than they even are today, um, the Seahawks still only won by 3. And so, but again, that's very superficial, weak,
Mm-hmm.
surface level analysis, and that should never be good enough to get into the
Which
portfolios or to get into any of the
which
contests.
brings us to our next game, which we heard on the podcast all week. Another superficial, crappy handicap was on the Houston Texans against the Carolina Panthers. All we heard this week was, man, the Houston Texans, give me the -4.5. Give me the -4. It doesn't matter. Man, this guy, Kyle Allen, he's not going to be any good. Kyle Allen sucks. What has he shown? He's played 2 bad teams. Week 17 last week. Like, okay. Basically, it was our handicap of the Skins. We really only looked at it from one very specific angle, and that's all they talked about. That's all they presented as a part of their handicap, which is a poor handicap, especially if you're laying points, because now you have no margin of error. Like, you have to be dead right about, man, Kyle Allen stinks, and so Houston's just gonna like blow them out. What? Okay, so that's the handicap,
Yeah,
and
and if you're betting Texans 4.5, you might as well be betting them 6.5. Because basically you got to win by a touchdown for
yeah,
all intents and purposes.
yeah, and so I think that was my argument with Brett this week. I said, you know, he liked Carolina. I didn't love Carolina, but I was like, at least I know the sharps or the square sharps are harping their best picking the Texans with no handicap, with a handicap that's rudimentary, and it doesn't paint a broader picture. It doesn't tap into any other possibilities or angles. Just Kyle Allen's unproven. He's not going to do it again. So Texans are at home. That's not a good
Yeah.
handicap.
Yeah, I mean it was a single angle handicap, just a fade of Kyle Allen.
And again,
And
and this is why I brought up the point earlier is this podcast is like these podcasts are done on what, on a Wednesday and a Thursday. So yeah, they're trying to sell you picks. They're trying to sell you crap. And granted, sometimes they have good points, but their picks, who they're actually picking, like I wouldn't be surprised if half the time they change their mind, they flip by Sunday morning. It's a radio show. They're trying to sell you stuff. So just
yeah.
friendly reminder: if someone's telling you something that's their best pick on Thursday, don't buy it. Like wait till Sunday, see if it actually makes any sense.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So Browns Ravens. I think we talked about it already a little bit briefly. This was a really great game, just as far as a little bit of vindication in kind of our
sweet,
macro
sweet
theses
vindication.
on both Browns and Ravens. Obviously, so the Browns won the game 40-25. We're kind of in control for all of the second half and most of the game. In fact, it was 7-7. The Browns took a 7-0 lead. Then it was 7-7. Then it was 10-7. So basically, it was either tied or Browns had the lead for the entire game. Nick Chubb went wild, 20 carries, 165 yards, 3 touchdowns, including an 88-yard scamper. And again, this was the Browns team that we felt like is going to show itself at pockets in the middle of the season and become more consistent later in the season, kind of like as the season matures and they develop this chemistry. And then also just the Ravens and Lamar Jackson just not being the team, they're not going to play the Dolphins and the Cardinals every week.
Yeah,
And if they,
let's finish your point. Sorry.
yeah, no, I was just going to say, they're not going to play the worst teams in the NFL
Hmm.
week in and week out. So their performances are going to come way back down to earth. It was completely an artificial assessment of the Ravens by focusing on just those two games. And now we've seen in the last 2 weeks, they've come way down to earth.
Well, and it's
And
fairly clear what happened. So preseason, there was tons of Ravens hype in square circles, and then week one was confirmation bias, right? The best game of the season, the best
yeah,
game they've ever had as a franchise, crush a team who's tanking. We've never seen a situation like this, and that confirmation bias turned into, well, you must be wrong if you don't see what I see with the Ravens. Now, what's interesting to me is the whole reason, like, not the whole reason, a big part of our handicap coming into the season of fading the Ravens and even going under their season win total, which looks super sweet after week 1 and 2, with, teams with no wins in the division, Ravens 2-0, was their defense had a lot of changeover. Their best players are gone.
yeah.
So I mean, I don't know about you, but do you just replace your best player by snapping your fingers the next year? Or does it take some time to, even if you have a really good coach in John Harbaugh, to find the right players, get the scheme together, get everything moving the way it should? So the assumption that, oh, this is the same Ravens team as last year, but now Lamar Jackson's even better. Like, well, but it's not the same team. It's actually worse than it was last year on defense. And as we know, the Ravens want to be a defensive, headstrong, punch in the mouth type team. But how can you do that if your defense is not at that level right now? And that's kind of the handicap that we always just didn't understand why other people didn't bring it up. And again, this is part of the one-sided handicap that people do. And granted, we do it because generally people get lazy, and no fault of their own. Maybe they just don't know. But it's easy to pluck out one iota, one point of data and go, well, this is why this is going to happen. What's not easy is going, well, that's one scenario. What's scenario 2, 3, 4, 5? Let's compare it, contrast, let's look at all of it. Okay, what's the most likely thing to happen? What's the alternate
Yeah.
scenario? And that's
Yeah.
not what was happening in the public's eyes.
Yeah, and if the Ravens aren't going to have a great defense like they had last year, then that really kind of stifles a run first offense. And it's going to force Lamar Jackson into a passer, which it did when that kind of those circumstances presented itself last season. That's when they struggled, when he's forced to be a passer. And now it's really hindering them now. And again, having a bad defense, or at least a mediocre to bad defense, is going to make kind of the structure of their offense really difficult to continually implement at a high level, and to also be successful. So last game, Jaguars Broncos. Jaguars win the game 26-24. This went really back and forth at the end. Broncos were actually up 17-3.
Oh,
Um,
I was
I
feeling
know
so good.
yeah, you were feeling good. It's basically texting saying, oh, like it would have been nice to have Broncos and the Super Contest and stuff like this. And but Broncos defense collapsed in
Yeah.
the end, and Gardner Minshew was able to string together a couple key third down conversions and fourth down conversions in the end of the game. And Broncos did get some sacks. They had 0 sacks going in this game. I think they had 4 sacks this game, so they were able to get pressure on Gardner Minshew. But it was, again, kind of like what same thing with the Jags is what happened when the Jags played the Texans and they covered. They ultimately lost, going for 2 and then failing. But basically, the Jaguars were a no-show for half to 3/4 of that game, and then rally 2 to 3 successful drives together, and then right back in the game. And that's kind of the same thing that happened here, actually.
Yeah.
So Jaguars are slow starters on the road, but kind of like find their rhythm later in the game.
And what's interesting is where we've been most successful this season so far, and where we've actually not done our due diligence, is our macro themes coming into the season have been deadly accurate. but on a week-to-week basis, we're finding reasons to fade our macro thesis. And mine on the Broncos was it's going to take some time for the new coaching staff and the players to even get in sync and working as a cohesive unit. And I think we've seen that. They're now 0-4, right? So
and now because basically there was a couple times this season where I liked Broncos, but basically that was always your handicap is that kept us off Broncos pretty much all season, which is good because they're 0-4 and 0-4 against the spread. So
yeah, and again, I'm glad you kept me off this. I wish I was.
Yeah, and I kept you off it this time actually, so we actually flipped.
And it's because it's why it's important to have someone to bounce things off of. So if you just handicap by yourself, good luck. Like maybe you can do it. Great, good luck to you. The issue is, with this one, this was like my Redskins handicap. Unfortunately, is after watching the tape, I'm not buying Gardner Minshew. I'm just not. He's proven me wrong right now, but I think he's situationally just kind of hitting it right timing, back shoulder throws. He's making some nice plays. But this was really a situational, oh man, Broncos at home. They're going to, Devin's going to show up. Von Miller's going to get some sacks. And a lot of that played out. But that's only one side of a handicap. Like, I'm overweighting one thing that even when it comes true, doesn't mean it's the complete picture. And that's where it's good to have someone else to remind you, well, hey, I mean, what about this X, Y, and Z? And you go, okay, you may be right. Let me temper my handicap lean. So
well, and the other thing is the headlines here are going to be that is going to be Gardner Minshew and that he led this team back. But the thing, and even I said that, but really this game was controlled by the Jaguars' run game. In fact, I mean, so Leonard Fournette had 30 carries for 225 yards. So he just absolutely destroyed the Broncos on the ground. And that's really what extended a lot of drives and put them into really favorable situations. Obviously, Minshew did play well in the end and was able to capitalize when Fournette put him in good positions. But, I think if you still have reservations about Minshew, I think they possibly still could be valid. I think because basically Minshew shows up when the pressure's on, and he kind of really doesn't when it's not. But again, Jaguars have a great defense as well, so that's going to keep them in games. And so if the Jaguars defense is going to keep them in games, and basically Minshew just needs to game manage for most of the game and then turn into a clutch player in the end, they can string together some wins and certainly some covers.
Yeah, I'd like to watch these games of, time pending, all 4 in a row, because I feel like Minshew has been performing fairly decent in all 4 games, like by and large. So
yeah. Okay, so I think we're like way over super long this time. A lot to digest, probably because we've been bemoaning so many games this week, and so many picks and our thoughts and our analysis and our philosophy. But so let's get into next week's games.
Oh, I'm excited.
So
the first,
the fun part.
Hey, real quick, guys. The first quarter, essentially, week 17 is its own frickin' beast. The first quarter is complete. So, in Super Contest and Circa and our Sportsfolio, I mean, we're over 65% in Super Contest. We're over 75% in Circa. The winner last year in Super Contest, by the way, hit 70%. So we're on par. We're on pace. And our portfolios are generally up and doing just fine. So,
yeah, I mean, core is still going to be up approximately 10%. Aggressive still going to be up 30%, possibly more, especially if some of the last bets pending on Steelers Bengals cashes. If the Steelers Bengals position cashes, aggressive is actually going to be up like 7% this week, and it's going to be up over 40% on the year. So just wild.
Wow.
So let's get into next week's games. So Thursday, Bengals at Steelers.
Oh wait, Bengals at. Wait, that's Monday. That's tomorrow.
Oh fuck yeah!
Wait, for a second I was like, are they playing twice in 4 days? Holy shit! NFL's trying to fuck teams.
I'm just on so much tilt right now that.
But again, we
can't think.
We beat the consensus in Super Contest and Circa, like just from a,
I know, but I think I'm basically going to be pissed every week if we don't go 4-1 or 5-0 because I
fair.
feel like
We
we
can and
have
we
the
should.
skill set to do
Yes,
that. Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. All right. So thinking more clearly now. Okay. Rams at Seahawks.
Well, that'll be good. I'm gonna say Rams -3.
Rams -1.
Interesting.
Any lean?
Definitely in Rams. I mean, getting embarrassed at home like that, and Seahawks have
Yeah.
played like crap at home. But the problem
Yeah.
is, if you look at the last couple of years, I mean, these teams play well against each other. Like they both play well against each other generally.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's
Rams did win in Seattle last
yeah,
year.
exactly. So it's probably going to be a competitive game. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I gotta watch this tape. Like,
This is such a different line too. I mean, granted, again, it's a Thursday game, and I've kind of said this comment before that I feel like every Thursday game should essentially be a pick 'em
mm.
because there's just way too many variables going on. You just don't know how teams are going to react.
Oh
And
wait,
basically, this is a pick 'em.
hold on. We got to do a better job because there's a little more context as to why maybe Rams laid an egg this Sunday. If you know what I
Is
mean.
that like?
I
No, I
mean,
don't.
oh, sorry. I mean, they play Thursday, obviously. Division game going to Seattle. Playing a
True.
crappy Bucks
Yep.
game at
True.
home may not really have
True.
put entire focus there.
No, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I would say I would slightly lean Rams as well. All right, so Bears Raiders
London.
in London.
I mean, Bears are probably -4.
-5.5.
Yeah, it's a little high. It really depends. Kind of.
Well, I mean, Chase Daniel's probably going to be the starter.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it depends on is what you think Chase is gonna. Is he really gonna game manage or is he gonna make a play or two? If he makes a play
Yeah,
or
but the
two,
thing is even regardless of that, again, this is like that Thursday night football type,
mm-hmm.
circumstance going on because it's just so unique. You just don't know how these teams are going to react going out to London. There's just so many other variables going on that it just makes it really hard to handicap.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if we're going to touch this one.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, I would probably slightly lean. Yeah, I don't know. It's tough because I mean the Bears defense is just so good. I feel like they could really cause a lot of turnovers with Derek Carr.
Yeah,
Um,
it's fair.
okay, Jaguars at Panthers.
Panthers -3.
Panthers -3.5.
Yeah, it's a little. It's a little high. I'd lean Jags.
Yeah, this is a tough one too, man. Like I'm not liking this week so far. Okay, Vikings at Giants.
Ooh, I know where I'm going with this. Vikings -3.
Vikings -4.5.
Oh man, I want to fade.
Road. Remember, this is a road.
But the Giants'
Road
defense is not good. That is my
I mean, you
caveat.
can't-
My cousins on
like,
the hold on real quick. My cousins on the road
Okay, gotcha.
fade is against good defenses or defenses that in that situation might be good. Then again, I gotta watch this tape because my feel is the Giants were so pumped after beating the Bucks in that fashion and having Eli Manning finally put out to pasture that they just took it. They start games now at another level, a level that they for at least the next couple games, especially if they keep winning. So,
yeah, no, they had great energy, and it was very kind of obvious to see right at the beginning and throughout the whole game. Actually, even the defense was super pumped up.
And that's my point.
On a lot of the stops, but I mean, Daniel Jones did throw 2 interceptions, 2 bad interceptions, and then he actually threw what he should have thrown another 2 that were just like flat out drops by the Redskins. So Danny Dimes should have at least thrown 4 interceptions. So worth noting as well.
Okay.
Patriots at Redskins.
Patriots -13.
Patriots -14.5. Man, such big lines. I mean, but I can't. This
Oh,
is
I
the
can't touch
definition of
those
what we've
skins. Yeah.
yeah, no. This is what we've talked about butthurt. We are incredibly butthurt on the
Skins.
Redskins.
2 weeks in a
Now
row.
remember, because we thought we were butthurt last week,
No.
but actually we weren't butthurt because we thought like, oh, the Redskins, like if Keenum doesn't like if basically if the Redskins don't play like crap, they win this game. you know, and we actually wanted to pick the Redskins this week. When your butt hurt, you don't want to bet that team.
Yeah.
Like you are so resistant,
Here.
you can't do it.
The perfect play was the Jets plus 22.5. We did not
Yes.
want to play the Jets. We
No,
actually
we did
said
not.
if the Jets don't cover this, how are we
It'd
going
be
to
embarrassing.
live with ourselves? And granted, they really shouldn't have covered it, but
No.
the line's so big, anything can happen. So
Yeah. All right, Falcons at Texans.
Texans minus 3.5.
Texans minus 4.5. So all these lines are bigger than you're expecting.
Yeah, I would lean. I gotta see what is wrong with the Falcons, man. God, they're bad.
Even at home.
I mean, that's a new low.
I mean, their offensive line has got serious problems.
Yeah, they
so I
do.
think that's one of the main kind of impetuses for their underperformance. But yeah, gonna have to look at the tape a little bit more closely too. Texans, I mean, again, they're kind of hit or miss as well. So I mean, it's hard to take them minus 4.5. Broncos at Chargers.
Chargers minus probably 6.5. Maybe actually a little
Chargers
more.
minus 6.5. There you go. Ding,
Nice.
ding, ding.
Ding, 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 ding.
Um,
I mean,
yeah,
Chargers are
that's
so banged up. I mean, I would lean Broncos for sure. I think.
Yeah, I would probably lean Broncos.
I mean,
as
and if
well.
you look at if you look at the Broncos, right? Obviously, they kind of laid a dud versus the Raiders, which I called. They went on the road. No, they came back versus the Bears, but they were really getting dominated that game. Actually, should have pulled out a victory. Didn't. Went on the road versus the Packers. Played competitive. Had a 17-3 lead versus the Jags. Lost by 2. So I mean, this team hasn't. I mean, they haven't been getting beat.
No, they played competitively. 3.5 weeks.
Yeah. So
yeah, I would probably lean Broncos as well.
And Chargers are just so banged up. So that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. And again, going from LA to Miami, back to LA,
Ooh,
worth noting.
Good call.
Colts at Chiefs.
Oh, and division game. Colts at Chiefs. Oh, Chiefs are probably minus 6.
Minus 10.
What is TY playing? Well,
Yeah.
I think.
No, yeah. I mean, the Colts.
I mean, to be fair, Chiefs haven't covered in 2 games in a row. Now they're back home. If Colts are super banged up,
I like Chiefs. Yeah.
Because this is the thing.
If the Colts are banged up, I mean, I think the Chiefs are going to want to explode.
Like somebody wanted to disagree with me yesterday. Jacoby Brissett, without TY, without Devin Funchess, I'm not sure he's that much better than a game manager. And I'm not sure a game manager can keep up with the Chiefs if the Chiefs are playing a focused, motivated spot, which I feel like they probably would be in this situation. So
True. Browns at Niners. Next Monday night.
Niners minus 4.5.
Niners minus 3.
Interesting.
That's a tough one.
It's a good line.
That is a good line.
Yeah. That's
and then some games that we don't have lines for yet, but you can still predict them. I just won't correct you. Cardinals at Bengals.
Oh yeah. Let me see what happens Monday night, but Bengals probably minus 3, or probably more.
Game. No,
minus
it's gonna be
6.
more than that.
Yeah, maybe.
I would say I would probably say minus 5 and a half.
Yeah, 4 to 5.
I was gonna say 5.5.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else do we have here? Jets at Eagles. I'm surprised. I don't know why this line isn't up, but it's not. But Jets at Eagles.
Yeah, probably just wait on injury news. Minus. I mean, yeah, definitely minus like 10 or 15 or something. It's gonna be up there. 10 or 15.
I mean, the Eagles are definitely also injured. But obviously it's still much better than an
But I
against
wonder.
me.
See, what's interesting is now that we get into bye weeks, real quick. Just want to touch on. Niners have been playing really well, even
Lost some momentum.
despite the yeah. Do they lose a little of that momentum? Um, and
Now the
then
Browns have a momentum.
and on the other side, Jets just getting a chance to just like breathe and go, okay, let's patch up the holes in the sinking boat. Like,
Yeah.
what are we gonna do?
But if I imagine C.J. Mosley probably should be back, so that's key
Oh, that's
since
good.
he's like the quarterback of the defense. I mean, I don't know that he's going to, but I think he probably should.
Gotcha.
But if Darnold isn't back still, and Luke Falk is still the quarterback, I mean, after that we covered the Jets versus the Patriots, I mean, I basically said I was probably never going to bet the Jets again
Yeah.
for the rest of the season. So yeah, this has got to be a massive amount of points for me to even consider the Jets. It's got to be like 13 and a half.
And you said it was Jets at Eagles.
Jets at Eagles.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Ooh. Well, actually, here's another one. Ravens at Steelers.
That'll be good. Again,
That's gonna
a
be
couple of
good.
those games depend on what happens Monday night for me.
Yeah.
But I mean, Ravens will be
No,
favored.
see, like I disagree. I disagree with that. Like, I understand that's why it might adjust the line.
Exactly.
But again, it's like it's inconsistent. Like what we were saying earlier is again, you don't want to be so hyper focused on just what just happened. Now it can still influence
Well,
your decision
that's a
making,
good
but
point.
it shouldn't be like your overarching thesis is dominated by what happened last week.
Well, let's play it out. Steelers give the game away, lose by 7. What's the line? Ravens.
I mean, I would say it's probably Steelers -1.
Even if they lose 20-10.
If the Steelers look bad and lose, I would say it's pick 'em. Like Steelers
No,
-1
I
still.
think Ravens -4.
Wow.
Remember, there's Ravens hype, man.
Yeah, I mean that's true.
And if
Because I was thinking if the Steelers look good today, and Mason Rudolph looks a little bit better than last week, and he looks more along the lines of when he did versus the Seahawks. I was thinking Steelers -2.5, -3.
oh no, I don't think so. I think.
But yeah, you're right. There is a lot of
if
market support for the Ravens.
I think you're right. If the Steelers dominate, which is possible, the Bengals. I think if they dominate it, they could be a -1.5.
All right, so last game, Packers at Cowboys.
Ooh, Cowboys -3.
Yeah, well, we don't have the
Oh
line
yeah,
yet,
sorry.
but
I mean, Cowboys at home.
I would say it's gonna be 3.5, 4. I think people are. Yeah, I was gonna say 3.5, 4.
Yeah, Packers getting 10 days to prepare.
Yeah. All right, so that wraps it up.
All right. Well,
slightly negative performance across core and conservative in this portfolios. Negative about 1.5%. Still positive on the year. Aggressive looks aimed for having positive performance on the week, depending on what happens tomorrow night. Circa 2-2 and waiting for Bengals next pick up. So hopefully we can finish 3-2. And Super Contest finishes 3-2. We're all above 60 to 70% hit rate. So even though we're very disappointed, we're still in position.
that's all we can ask.
And I think that's all we can ask. That wraps it up. See you guys next week.
Thanks.